morning again. The late Rachel Carson was an environmentalist, a marine biologist, and an author. And something that she wrote goes like this: there is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after the night and spring after the winter. I like that. There's something healing in those kind of assurances. Um, I think it's not only nature's patterns that bring a comforting, some sense of continuity, some sense of belonging, of regularity, but we humans, we develop rituals usually in context, in concert with these changes in nature. And these rituals serve as patterns that we develop, that we find significance in, that we find meaning in. I'm sure some of you probably celebrated the spring equinox a few days ago. Um, I had actually forgotten about it, but later on in the day, it's like, oh yeah, it's the equinox at 5:09 or something this morning. So, but we find meaning in these types of things. Uh, when I was a kid, the most meaning for me, and even to this day, at 78 years of old, 78 years of age, the most meaning I find is on Sunday morning worship. Um, it's when community comes together and we admit that we don't know. We have an idea, and give, we offer an openness to whatever is and say, here I am, touch me, let me know, let me realize that I'm part of everything that is. And the same feeling that I've gotten lately when I come out on those days where the sun is shining and the temperatures are a little bit higher, and I can literally feel my body and my mind responding to it. And I get a little bit more energy. Not that I can do a lot with it, but I get a little bit more energy and I feel better. Well, I get that same type of feeling when I come out here on Sunday mornings. I always have. I mean, this is what excites me. And this is a pattern, a mark, if you will, that I've established, a post. And the rest of my life, the warp and the weft of my life is hanging on these markers, these post markers. So it's very important to me. And I used to have clients when I had my veterinary practice, and I would mention the word Sunday morning worship, and they'd say, "Wait a second, you're Buddhist, you know, you don't worship." I said, "What do you mean I don't worship?" They said, "You don't believe in God." I said, "Look, whether or not I believe in God is immaterial to everything. You know, I said, because Buddhism is based on something else, and whether or not God exists doesn't matter. How we address suffering." And and then I would tell them, worship. The word worship comes from an old English word that means worthiness. It means something or someone that is worthy of having respect or homage shown to it or them. That's all it means, the word worship. So we come out here and we do worship. It's a ritual that we have developed to pay homage, to show respect to the historical Buddha Shakyamuni and his teaching, the Dharma. So Sunday morning worship is my favorite. It's my marker every week that I can count on. Whether there's only a couple of us here or whether there's more of us here, it keeps me going. It energizes me. Well, when I was in seminary, Buddhist seminary at Still Point, one of the things that we seminarians had to do was we had to pick a favorite disciple. We had a couple of books of the disciples that we had to read and study, and we had to pick a favorite disciple. And we had to do as much historical research as we could gather, and we had to present a talk to the rest of the seminarians. And I knew who my favorite was going to be from the get-go. And it's a fellow named Kachayana, or just Kachana for short. And Kachana was a pretty intelligent dude, lived quite a distance from the historical Buddha, like 500 to 600 miles away, lived in Avanti, whereas the Buddha is up in Magadha. But he had heard through the messages, the grapevines that had filtered on down, that there was this guy up in Magadha. And he was fascinated. Kachana was a really intelligent guy, intelligent in the things of the day that they studied, and very adept at the martial arts. And he finally decided, I'm going to make the journey. I want to learn from this man. And it wasn't like, you hop onto your motorcycle, your car, a plane, and get a quick ride. This was a many, many day journey to go 600 miles in those days. But he gathered his retinue and they went up to Magadha. And he stayed with the Buddha for a while. And he realized the worthiness of this particular training that he received from him, the worthiness of this teaching. And he said, I've got to take this back and share it with my fellow countrymen. And so he did. Now, did he get everything that the Buddha later, because he was one of the earliest disciples, did he learn everything else that the Buddha later taught? Probably not. But what he did do is he went back to Avanti and he became well known for being able to preach the Dharma. And one of the things he's noted for is developing what we now call Yambul, or Buddha recollection. But he told his people about the historical Buddha, what he looked like, the marks of his specialness. And he said, keep in mind, recollect what I have taught you about this person, and visualize what I have taught you. And Buddha visualization really became important, and he became noted for it. One of the first. If you're not in the presence of the historical Buddha, you learn to visualize him. It was a form of worship, of showing the worthiness that you see in this person and his teaching. Well, after the historical Buddha died, and after he was cremated, his ashes were divided up into 8 different places and placed in mounds, funeral mounds at 8 different places. Those places became places where people would gather. They would listen to talks that were given by the Buddha's disciples. They would sit in meditation, and they would circumambulate what are known as these stupas, or these funeral mounds. And this was all part of showing the worthiness of the historical Buddha and his teaching, who was no longer there. In art, 2 of the first symbols that were used to show the importance of this person were the footprint. And the other is the Dharma chakra, or the wheel of Dharma. In fact, we have a hand over there that has the Dharma chakra right in the middle of it. This is one of the very first types of Buddhist representation of the historical Buddha without showing an image of him. Became very, very popular. And in the 1st century, we have the first statues that are being formed in what's now Afghanistan and Pakistan, called Gandhara. And they were of Greek Hellenistic form. They have the Buddha, who looks like a Greek with a toga on. And those were the first statues that were formed. Again, to show the worthiness that this person and his teaching deserves. Worship. And right along the first century also came the first of the Mahayana Sutras, the Lotus Sutra being one of the earliest, probably written beginning sometime in the 1st century of the Common Era into possibly the 2nd century of the Common Era. The Mahayana tradition. The Mahayana tradition, which says not everything is absolute in terms of behavior. Rather, everything is relative, all based on intention. Intention with your motivator being compassion. If you have good intention, motivated by compassion, even if your behavior is to break a precept or encourage someone else to break a precept, if it's all because of the compassionate response, it's okay. So many people come to Buddhism and they want to do a lot of reading. Naturally, I did too over the years. And we want to learn the doctrines. And we want to learn the philosophy of it. And if you do enough reading and you hang around long enough, you realize there is no unified philosophy. There is no unified doctrine. It's all over the place because it's not meant to be a systematic study of Buddhist theology. All of the sutras, especially the Mahayana sutras, are based on the experiences, the practical experiences of practitioners and teachers. And they try and put it down in words, which is nearly impossible. And so we, as students, we read those words and we say, oh, it says this over here. No, this philosophy says this. They disagree. Get out of your heads, folks. Crawl out of your heads. I just had one of our new students, our new Tegel students who lives in Norway, just 3 days ago. He's been in his head asking question after question. And I told him, crawl out of your damn head and get into your heart. And I haven't heard back from him. He's already signed up to start IBS, so hopefully he's still going to take it. But I haven't heard back from him. He wants to know this and that and the other thing, and that's not what Buddhist practice is about. Remember, as Rachel Carson says, nature can heal us. Worship can heal us. Buddhist doctrine is not a series of tenets that you take, you accept, or you reject. Buddhist doctrine is meant to be medicine to help cure us from our spiritual ills. Buddhist practice isn't based on intellectual curiosity or understanding. It is based on experiential results, period. So, let's see. Let's read this here first. From, in case, I don't know if any of you have this book or have heard of it, Paul Williams, Mahayana Buddhism, The Doctrinal Foundations. An excellent book. Gets a little bit complicated at times, but if you want to understand Mahayana Buddhism as a practice and where each type of philosophy grew out of and how they may be connected and how they may not be connected, I'd recommend this book, Paul Williams. So listen to, and this is not to denigrate this guy's teaching over here on Tuesday nights of the Diamond Sutra and the Way of the Bodhisattva, the books, as you read the books and studied the books, and let the words of the books soak into you through meditation. But listen to what Paul Williams says here. And this is especially about the perfection of wisdom or the Prajna Paramita Sutras, such as the Heart Sutra that we chanted this morning and the much longer ones. In approaching the Mahayana Sutras, we immediately confront presuppositions concerning the nature of the book which these texts put into questions. As we have seen, the sutra is not one object amongst others, but it is rather the body of the Buddha, a focus of celebration and worship on the model of relic worship. The book is not a freestanding, self-explanatory item, but it's an entity embedded in all of religious practice, a product of, a guide to spiritual experience. Those of the westernized world expect a book, perhaps, to lead through a systematic and clearly defined stages from a beginning through a middle to a conclusion. Reading, we think, is a private affair, a solitary affair, requiring peace and leisure and silence. But the landscape of the Mahayana Sutras is quite extraordinary. Space and time expand and conflate. Connections seem to be missed. We moved abruptly from ideas so compressed and arcane as to verge on the meaningless. to page after page after page of repetition. If we approach books as a consumer, regarding texts as goods to be devoured, one after the other, from cover to cover, then all too often we'll find the Mahayana Sutras really boring. About as boring as a board game for which we have only the rules, lacking all the pieces and the board. In fact, the study of a Buddhist sutra was neither private nor peaceful. Certainly, the classical times in India, a text would be copied and read, but reading was closer to chanting out loud. Widespread mastery of silent reading is really a relatively recent development in world culture. The historian of medieval monasticism, the Reverend Jean Leclerc, has observed that, and Jean Leclerc was a Benedictine monk, a scholar, and good friend of the Trappist monk Thomas Merton, and those two talked and shared a lot on the nature of monasticism and worship and what it all meant. So this is what Jean Leclerc, the Benedictine monk, says. In the Middle Ages, as in antiquity, they read, usually not as today, principally with the eyes, but with the lips, pronouncing what they saw, and with the ears, listening to those words pronounced, hearing what is called the voices of the pages. Doctors of ancient times used to recommend reading to their patients as a physical exercise on an equal level with walking, running, or ball playing. End of quote. Each Buddhist monk would probably own no more than one or two sutras early on, which would rapidly be learned by heart, not only through frequent repetition, but because memory of the text was demanded by the scholastic environment. Moreover, since these sutras and their exegetical treatises were also guides to meditation, so as anyone who has practiced reference to a series of written, who has practiced knows, meditation cannot be formed effectively through repeated references to a series of written instructions. Buddhist texts were intended as no more than mnemonic devices, a scaffolding, a framework for textual exposition by a teacher in terms of his own experience and also of the tradition, the lineage transmission from his teachers, traced back to the Buddha himself, or to a Buddha, or to some other form of authorized spiritual revelation. This practice, too, and treatment of the sacred text in Buddhism is not only of historical interest. In traditional Mahayana cultures, especially among the Tibetans, these texts are still used today and studied in the age-old way. The scholar who would write a study of Buddhist practice or even doctrine without bearing this in mind is like an art historian who would study architecture by ignoring the building and looking only at the bricks. One of our monks who was ordained in Korea a year and a half ago, I guess it is now, Sunim, who is a native of Czech Republic and living in Korea now. And I had gotten him in touch with, he had called me and wanted to go to Korea and had been practicing with another school for 4 or 5 years. So anyhow, he's living in Korea now. He's one of our Taegyeong monks. And he and I stay in touch. And so he posted on Facebook the other day how at the beginning of the year, he was in Japan getting his visa renewed. And he was practicing with the Soto Zen group in Obama City, Japan. And so this Soto Zen temple has a tradition where at the beginning of every new year, they pull out the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 100,000 lines. And it is written in 600 volumes, these 100,000 lines. And he put some photographs there of, he participated in this, of these 600 volumes that are just stacked up everywhere. And it is a worship experience. They read through, depending on how many people are there, depends on how long this takes. You know, it might take a good part of a day and it might take a week with many hours every day. So I listened to a part of it and on YouTube. And there are parts of it that sound like what I would imagine the floor of the New York Stock Exchange sounds like, with people shouting and yelling, and sometimes there's some sort of rhythm to it. And a lot of times there's not. It's just coming at you from everywhere. And then there's gongs and there's bells. And I mean, it's really an experience. Now, I tell you, and I contacted him back, and we emailed, or not emailed, but Facebook messaged a bit yesterday, and he explained it more fully. And these books that open up, I visualize them as kind of children's books that kind of fall out. They're accordion like, and they fall out. And he said this is part of the worship experience, and some of it is chanted as it falls out, and then there's other things that are chanted in response to what's on the page. And he said, there are certain hand gestures that you do, even though this is a Soto Zen temple. There are certain mudras that you do, and he said it is extremely precise and yet extremely beautiful. And he said it was something to behold, to be part of it. The Prajnaparamita Sutra in 100,000 lines. Now, I have seen the book, and I used to have the book here, and I don't know if I still have it or not, or if it got destroyed in a flood a few years back. But, it was just amazing. And you just open it up and read it, and it seems like the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's extremely boring to just read it like that. But when you hear it, and when you see it, and when you smell it with the incense going and the gongs going and the chanting rhythmic nature that it can become, it just overwhelms your body. You swim in it. It fills you. It fills the core of your being with it. You're not meant to understand it intellectually. It's meant to be understood experientially. You and the sutra become one and the same. And that's how you manifest it. I'm big on, and not that I don't like intellectual inquiry, because I do. And the life that I've led, I've done a lot of reading and a lot of study, and I value it. But I value more now the experiential aspect of everything, and just letting everything, and not maybe fully understanding it, maybe not even understanding it at all, but just letting it flow into me and through me, and feeling like I'm part of so much more. Listen, if you would, and don't put your hands in Hapchong, because this is a little bit of a long reading. But from the Lotus Sutra, there's a place early in here where it says, to attain the Buddha way is difficult by trying to understand things intellectually. And the Buddha way is not meant to be understood intellectually. Now we go to this part, and the different ways that you can understand the Buddha way. And this is from the Lotus Sutra, one of the first and the most important Mahayana sutras there is. So listen, if you will. And they go through here different ways of experiencing the 6 paramitas, through relics, through stupas, through Buddha towers, through Buddha images. And just listen, if you will, because there are other ways that we've come part of the Buddha way other than through our mind and our rational discursive thinking. If there are living beings who have countered the past Buddhas, and if they have listened to that law, presented alms, kept the precepts, shown forbearance, been assiduous, practiced meditation and wisdom, cultivating various kinds of merit and virtue, then persons such as these have attained the Buddha way. After the Buddhas have passed into extinction, if persons are of good and gentle mind, then living beings such as these have attained the Buddha way. After the Buddhas have passed into extinction, if persons make offerings to the relics, raising 10,000 or 1,000,000 kinds of relic towers, using gold, silver, crystal, seashell, agate, carnelian, lapis lazuli, pearls, to purify and adorn them extensively, In this way, erecting these towers, or if they raise up stone mortuary temples, or those of sandalwood or aloes, hovenia or other kinds of timber, or of brick, tile, clay, or earth, if in the midst of the broad fields they pile up earth to make a mortuary temple for the Buddhas, or even if little boys at play should collect sand to make a Buddha tower, then persons such as these have attained the Buddha way. If there are persons who, for the sake of the Buddha, fashion and set up images, carving them with many distinguishing characteristics, then all have attained the Buddha way. Or if they make things out of the 7 kinds of gems, or of copper, red or white copper, pewter, lead, tin, iron, wood, or clay, or use cloth soaked in lacquer or rosin to adorn and fashion Buddha images, then persons such as these have attained the Buddha way. If they employ pigments to paint Buddha images, endowing them with the characteristic of 100-fold merit, if they make themselves or have others make them, then they have attained the Buddha way. Even if little boys in play should use a piece of grass or a piece of wood or a brush, or perhaps even a fingernail to draw an image of the Buddha, then persons such as these, bit by bit, will pile up merit and will become fully endowed with a mind of great compassion. They have attained the Buddha way. Merely by converting the bodhisattvas, they bring us salvation and a release to numberless multitudes. And if persons in the presence of such memorial towers, such jeweled images, such painted images, if they should with reverent minds make offerings of flowers, incense, banners, or canopies, or if they should employ persons to make music, striking drums or blowing horns or conch shells, playing pipes, flutes, zithers, harps, balloon guitars, cymbals, and gongs, and if these many kinds of wonderful notes are intended wholly as an offering, or if one with a joyful mind sing one song in praise of the Buddha's virtue, even if it is just one small note, then all those who do these things have attained the Buddha way. If someone with a confused and distracted mind should take even one flower and offer it to a painted image, in time he would come to see countless Buddhas. Or if a person should bow or perform obeisance, or should merely press his palms together, or even should raise a single hand and give no more than a slight nod of the head, and if this were done in offering to an image, then in time he would come to see countless Buddhas. And if he himself attains the unsurpassed way, if he spreads salvation abroad to countless multitudes, he indeed will enter the nirvana of no remainder, as a fire dies out when the firewood is exhausted. Buddhist worship is more than just intellectual investigation, although certainly that is a part of it at the beginning. There are a lot of people out there who claim to be Buddhist because they've studied the Buddha way a lot, but they haven't done much to practice it or to show that they really revere it in terms of worship experience. It's good to see you here this Sunday morning. I hope that some of those who maybe are out there listening to this talk, who have been here in a few eons or two, would show up again and worship with us, because this is such an important part. This is the practice, to do this together in community. Thank you.